Welcome to the Color of Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Drew Singh is a fully remote growth product manager from Seattle, Washington, and author of the recently released book, Work from Abroad, a how-to guide to exploring the world while working a full-time U.S. remote job. Since March 2020, Drew has been living in Portugal during the pandemic, working U.S.-based hours. He's been living a remote-friendly lifestyle since 2018, when he left the Bay Area's tech world so he could craft a life with more freedom to travel. In 2019, he pursued #van life and explored North America in an outfitted van while working full-time. He's also spent time working from Central America. Learning how to keep his mental health in harmony is one of the biggest lessons he has learned throughout his travels. Hobbies of Drew's include outdoor adventures, indulging in foods he can't pronounce, attempting to figure out how to retire early, and exploring new cultures, of course. Well, Drew, thank you so much for joining us today. It's such an awesome thing that this worked out because you are in another country working.
That is true, Stephanie. No, thanks for having me. I'm super stoked to talk on the podcast.
Absolutely. So I'll jump right into it. How has it been being a digital nomad? And if for those that don't know about it, can you tell us what that even means?
Yeah, so digital nomad is a term coined with the internet and people working, right? Folks who are able to work independent of their physical location because they can do work from anywhere. So they may be able to work from other countries that they are not residents of or just other places in general.
And where are you currently located?
I am currently in Lisbon, Portugal at the moment. And so I am working from here during the entire pandemic. So it's been an adventure, but overall I've had a really great time and I'm really thankful for the freedom that it's provided me, you know.
What I liked about your e-publication is talking about kind of the pros and cons of working remotely in another country. Can you tell me what you learned about yourself as you've traveled through all these countries? And right now it's kind of temporary, permanent, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing is that as people, as human beings, I've learned that I'm extremely adaptable, and I think we are as creatures, right? A year ago, no one knew kind of what was going to happen with this virus, but now it's normal for people to wear masks. It's normal for people to totally change kind of their daily routine. And in addition to that, in regards to working from different places, different time zones, can you work a job from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m.? I think a lot of folks kind of think, oh, that sounds sort of weird. And I wouldn't work in my evening, but I gave it a shot and I actually realized it's a really nice schedule as long as you kind of understand it's just going to be something you got to adapt to.
Tell me a little bit more about the COVID response in Portugal, because obviously I'm in the States and it's kind of been an interesting ride over here. So kind of curious about that.
Definitely. So back in March, Spain and Italy, I don't know if you remember the news, were hit pretty hard, and Portugal is basically surrounded by Spain. And the country actually did a really good job in terms of preventing and locking down proactively. So that was really well done. And masks are not politicized here. I think that's something in the US that's been a thing, right? People understand you should probably wear a mask, and people do.
I know we're laughing about it, but seriously, I'm like, this is just helping other people and helping yourself. So
yeah, and I think I've realized too, and this is like the beauty of being in other places, you see things from a different perspective, you know. Portugal is a country of 10 million people, and it's easier for people to get things done and discuss politics and the governments to get things through, right? When you have the US, because I am from the US, we had 330, 350 million people. It really shows when you have this kind of all-encompassing pandemic, right?
yeah,
So.
I'm sure you kept up because you are an American citizen on Saturday. It just felt so hopeful. And I know people are a little skeptical about like, well, what's really going to change? I'm like, well, first off, that the president and vice president-elect wear masks when they're right next to each other. Like that's a huge shift for sure.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think Biden straight up said like masks are not a political statement. Everyone should wear a mask. just like everyone wears shoes when they go outside, generally speaking, right? You
It's
wear
a
a
health
shirt when you go
statement.
into a store. Like
Yeah,
times are changing, so we got to adapt, right?
for sure. So, obviously I'm a psychologist, so I want to know a little bit more about what are the mental health implications of moving from country to country?
Totally. That's a really great point that I think a lot of digital nomads don't talk about or don't think about, or folks who now have a remote job, right? And they want to work maybe from another city or another country. I think mental health is one of the biggest things to consider because not only are you going to be in a new culture that you're not familiar with, you're going to be in a different time zone, and you have work that you're going to have to do on top of all of this.
Yeah.
So, in a way, it kind of compounds, and no one really talks about it. And that's why I think College of Success is great because it dives into that side of life, right? So, therefore, like you have to really understand the type of work environments you are productive in. You have to understand the type of places that you will feel comfortable and safe and be able to be happy in, right? And on top of that, making sure you understand how you as a person, if you need community, how much community, are you okay being alone, right? Because these things are all going to happen all at once if you go somewhere that you've never been to that you don't know anyone in, right? So I think mental health is huge in regards to understanding how you'll be impacted when you travel or work from somewhere else.
How did you make that choice? I mean, you've been to, I don't know how many countries, let us know, but how are you able to kind of navigate that very complicated aspect of working remotely?
Yeah, I took baby steps. And I think anyone who's curious about working from different places should do the same thing, right? I'm based out of Seattle, Washington, and I originally lived for the last 10 years in the Bay Area. So I'd work down there for a week, stay with my sister, and realize, oh, okay, I can do this. And then to expand on that, I decided to work from Costa Rica, which is really basically the same time as the US, right? It's on central time. So there wasn't a huge time shift, but it was a cultural shift, right? Now, Costa Rica is still like a very comfortable and first world country. It's safe. It's not so far and foreign that it was too much of a culture shock, but it was obviously more adventurous than working from California, let's say, right? And then just from there, understanding learnings that I made, realizing, okay, well, maybe I could work a job from Europe. What if I did try to work from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m.? But understanding through those baby steps that each one of those stages was important in terms of understanding not only what I needed to do to be work productive, but also for my own emotional sanity, right?
One thing that I'm curious about as I've traveled as well are what are the mental health resources for nomads and expats, and how do you even go about finding those?
Yeah, I think it's important to know that you're not going to probably have as many resources if you're in a foreign country, right? If you are in your country of residence, your health insurance, the resources will probably be there. And so you have to realize that they're probably not going to be as easy and accessible as they would be wherever you reside. That being said, I think there are ways each person can take care of themselves. I personally meditate every morning for 10 to 15 minutes, no question. It's like brushing your teeth, right? It's the one thing to kind of start my day in a sane manner. And I use, for myself, a meditation app called Waking Up by Sam Harris. So again, there are obviously, tons of apps and practices people can follow. And I think it's just important to understand what will work for you because you're not going to be able to have, your therapist by your side if you're in another country, right?
Sure. And I imagine that now virtually, I'm seeing all my patients video therapy, that hopefully there'll be new doors. I know the laws are a little bit more difficult to navigate, but some states have offered reciprocity for licensing. So I'm hopeful that with that, there will be increased access to care. The other part is what you're talking about is how much community do you need? I have veterans and clients who literally say, I've been an isolator for quite some time. So this whole COVID shelter in place thing is not a big deal to me. But given that you're going to another country, how do you adapt to the cultures, the traditions, and not be that rude American that's making assumptions?
Totally. That's a really good question. I think the first off is getting educated before you go somewhere, right? If you're planning to go to another country, Google, understand what languages they speak. A lot of folks will just go somewhere and assume they speak English, but you shouldn't do that. You should understand that if they don't, it's not hard to download Duolingo and learn some basic phrases, because that will at least show that you're making an effort when you go to the grocery store, when you go to a restaurant. And I think it's not about necessarily being fluent, it's about being respectful of the country's culture that you're in. So prepare, right? You don't need to study for years or anything, but just understand where you're going and some of the customs that that country will have.
What I like about your book is that you talk about not being insular, in that when you're in co-working spaces or restricting yourself to maybe other Americans that are working there, how do you reach out and socialize with folks when it's brand new to you?
Yeah, you know, it's always going to be easy to hang out with folks that are from the same place you're from or speak the same language, right? And you need a little bit of that, because when you're getting going, it can be lonely, it can be tough. But I think understanding that the point of traveling and being in a foreign country is to soak up those new experiences. The way that I meet folks is kind of through different physical events, to the extent that they're there right now with COVID.
Yeah.
And really making an effort and showing, with folks within that country or other foreigners, that you're not just an ignorant traveler who needs to have all your comforts by your side. You want to be uncomfortable. You want to learn. You're making an effort. You're going to language school. These are things that I'm doing now that I think folks should consider. And I think that goes a long ways with connecting with locals, right? So just make effort, and then just be outgoing about seeing if folks want to grab dinner, having a couple people over. Again, unique times, right? But we do what you can.
What advice would you give to more introverted folks?
Yeah, I think if you're introverted, in a way, traveling and working abroad can be easier, because you're not going to be as socially dependent all the time. One of the ways, there's so many different types of apps out there, right, that allow you to connect with people. And that could be, a more, depending on the person, frictionless way to kind of get connected and make those steps toward meeting others. I would say in today's world, it's almost more designed for introverts with the pandemic. So don't be shy about where you're able to go as an introvert, for sure.
Yeah, over here, people are using like Bumble for friends to like meet virtually. And, with dating, I've heard the new thing is people ordering Uber Eats for, for their
Oh,
dates, and like eating at the same time in the same meal or whatever. So spill the tea. How is
while they're in different
dating?
houses, is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. Thanks for the tip, Stephanie.
You're welcome. Well, tell me a little bit more about that, because I imagine that moving around and dating is difficult. How do people do it? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think it's important, depending on your expectation, to try to stay somewhere for longer periods of time. If you're hopping from one city to one place every few weeks, it's going to be pretty much impossible to communicate with anyone of any substance, right? So my recommendation is really consider slowly traveling and working from different places. And when I say that, stay in a place for at least a month. Consider staying in a city for 2 months, 3 or 4 if you're really enjoying it, because then you can kind of get into the groove and have that real life routine, which will allow you to meet folks and do things like date, right? No one wants to go on a date with someone and learn that they have no plans for next week and they don't know where
Bye.
they're going to be, right? Like, that's not cool. And that's someone that probably is looking for a certain type of interaction. But if you're someone that is going to be in a city or a place for 2, 3 months, there's definitely an openness to meeting those people. And then on these apps, you can meet other people that may be also kind of working remotely or traveling. I think places that kind of have become hubs for remote workers, you'll meet folks and you'll be able to see them on apps, and they'll say like, oh, I'm a digital nomad. And so right there, it's like, okay, I understand kind of the lifestyle you're living, because it comes with certain things that you're doing and flexibility that you have.
Another thing that I wonder is when you're traveling alone, for instance, would your mindset shift if you were, say, a different gender? Would there be safety precautions or concerns and things you do differently?
Yeah, I think you're totally right in terms of if you're a male, if you're female, what environments do you feel safe? Or just people in general. Everyone feels safe and comfortable in different situations. And that comes back to that point of like, you have to understand kind of yourself and your needs, right? And how much preparation do you need? And should you be carrying pepper spray? Like, there's no harm in that. Like, what do you need to be comfortable? And what type of places should you consider going by yourself? Like, I think a lot of folks are like, Portugal, like, is it safe? Like, how is it right now? It's like, if you look on the Global Peace Index, it's the third safest country in the world. The US is, I think, 128 right now. So again, these are general things. There are
Mhm.
safe and dangerous places in all countries, but doing your research can help you be prepared and get that comfort to know you're making the right choice.
What if you have a family and there are quite a few couples and families that want to kind of be digital nomads because this whole new world, so to speak, has opened up to them, particularly those in the Bay Area? What preparations would you recommend for them and research?
Yeah, definitely. I know families. I have a friend from Arizona. He's got two kids. They're from the States and they work and live from Lisbon. And so I've seen it with my own eyes, people that are able to kind of live a global lifestyle with the more nuclear unit, if you will. So just like anything else, the more folks involved, like if you're alone, it's kind of easy to make decisions. With one partner, it's not impossible. You just have to consult and understand your needs, just like any type of commitment, right? And then with kids, it also depends on how long you plan on being abroad. School is important, right? Do you want to do this during the summertime where they're not in school? Is their school remote now? Does that mean that it opens up opportunities, right? This is something no one ever thought of a
Yeah.
year ago. Or do you actually want to move abroad and live somewhere for a couple of years? Well, there are international schools in almost every city now, right? And so thinking about it doesn't have to be just a month or two. If maybe your partner is from Portugal and her family's there, but you live in the States, it's now potentially possible to have a lifestyle that's more global.
So, what would you say is your most favorite country? I mean, obviously you're in Portugal, so you like it, I hope. But what has been, some of the greatest places that you've been to work from?
Yeah, I think one that is at the moment very close to the US but tough to travel to is Canada. Canada is beautiful. It is very familiar. And I think it's a great kind of first spot to consider if that opportunity to travel to Canada and work from there comes up because of just the natural beauty that's there. So last year I built out a van and I actually just drove and slept in my van and worked from Walmart parking lots through Canada.
I read
And it
that.
was
I was like, you're
it was
basically
beautiful.
homeless, but you have a job.
Basically homeless, but somehow having a job. I don't know how, and like literally working from McDonald's and Wendy's sometimes, but normally co-working spaces. I think Canada just offers that like adventure that a lot of people yearn for, while still being very close to home. And Mexico, Central America, Costa Rica, those are also great places that I recommend for folks who learn a little bit of Spanish. Like we all know a few phrases, most generally speaking in the US, and it's a great opportunity to kind of level that up because Spanish is such an important language in the US. So being able to leverage that and dive more into whichever culture you want to, that's a really fun opportunity as well. So those are a couple that I would suggest. And then there's Portugal, which is a more of a time commitment, but more doable than people think. That's all I will leave it at for now.
Where did you shower when you're in your van? Inquiring
No.
minds want to know.
So I would go with the no comment, but I'll give you the truth on it. Is that there would be gyms that I would go to, and so I'd get a membership at a gym and then shower there, but not as frequently as one would if they had one conveniently in their own home, right? Some days I would after work, go on a little trail run through the woods, and then jump in the lake, refresh myself that way, scrub down a little bit, and drive back to Walmart, take a nap, and then do it again the next day. So, don't tell my parents this. I think they're going to get super freaked out. But
well, I can
yeah.
edit it out if you want.
No, I actually think it's funny, but I'm just
Yeah.
making a joke. It's cool.
Well, and at Walmart, at least you have like dry shampoo that you could buy and stuff like that, or some people used to overaxe, spray.
Yeah, I think the working from a van, it's a whole subject in of itself. Wet wipes are super useful, right? The types of canned foods you can, there's a lot of stuff out there. You can eat pretty gourmet meals with canned food, I've learned. So again, that's probably another topic, but yeah, I think just the freedom that remote work provides opens up a lot of opportunities as long as you understand yourself and your needs, right?
Well, I mean, there's an adventurous side of you, obviously, that you're able to kind of rough it. I mean, it was hard for me, honestly, to even go to a cabin. And so, but I'm like, tough times. We can't travel to Vietnam and all those places that we want to go to. So, well, shifting gears just a little bit, everyone who can work remotely, they're doing it, right? And so I know that there are challenges, particularly with maybe efficiency, ability to juggle all these things that are going on. So what are some remote hygiene tips that you have for people, whether they're working in another country or not?
Definitely. The first one, which shouldn't be new to anyone, but it's especially important if you're working from abroad, is set standard work hours. Really make sure that you aren't just online for 16 hours a day, right? Make sure that you are taking that break, and even consider developing a remote commute routine. This is something that I started doing where once I finished my set hours, I would just do 15 push-ups just to kind of transition myself. And it could be anything. Maybe you watch a silly YouTube video. Maybe you take 10 deep breaths, but something to kind of actually transition you as a habit into your personal life. Those are a couple things. The other one is it's very tough. Not everyone has a luxury to have their own office, no matter where you're working, whether it's from home or remotely. Maybe you're working from a kitchen table. Try to stick to working from specific places if possible. So if you must work from the kitchen table, work from one seat and make that like your work seat. And then if you are having dinner with your family, try sitting in a different seat, because then you're going to be in a slightly different environment in terms of your views and everything. And that can actually help, because then you're kind of pegging where you're working to specific places. So your body becomes accustomed, like, this is where I work. I work in this seat at the table, or I work on this side of the couch if you don't have a desk. And so, again, understanding that not everyone has all the resources, but you got to do things that will help you work at your best. And another one would be make sure you have the right equipment, right? I highly recommend having a laptop stand, external keyboard, and mouse. Otherwise, if you're hunched on your laptop looking at your laptop screen all day, you're going to probably see a case of scoliosis popping up, and it's not going to be comfortable. And so, again, no matter where you're working, making sure you're as ergonomic as possible so you can be comfortable and be productive.
Yeah, I really recommend for clients, as much as possible, please don't work in your bedroom, because there's this level of anxiety there. It's, you sleep, you have sex, and that's it. That's the associations that you want to have there. But I know for some people it's really tough. And at the same time, definitely don't bring your laptop into bed or your phone and check emails.
That's a no-no.
Yeah.
100%. Keep your phone out if at all possible. Leave it outside the door. Really making sure you are utilizing spaces for a specific purpose, right? If possible.
So being away, I mean, how do you keep in touch with family and friends?
Yeah, so I keep in touch with my family, calls, Zooms, right? Nothing too out of the ordinary, but I mean, honestly, like, Instagram's a good way for me to broadcast out to friends, in a one-to-many fashion. But using Skype has a really good like $5 monthly subscription where you have unlimited calls to the US from anywhere. So that way I can just call my parents up and I'll, talk to them just as much as I would if I was in the States in regards to keeping up with them and seeing how they're doing.
What do they think about you moving from country to country?
Yeah, at first they were very worried because in March, if you remember, it felt like the world was crumbling,
Yeah.
everyone no one knew you know, what happened with this virus, and people were trying to go back to wherever countries they're from. If you remember, like there was a declaration by the US,
Yeah.
hey, everyone's got to come home. So, after talking to folks and doing some research, I felt that I'd be safe here. And eventually, like just with facts, I showed them that it's actually probably better for me to be here right now. And so right now they're happy for me. I'm going to get back to see them. Like I care about them. And that's where those check-ins and calls are so important. Uh, but like I've realized like my sister, she's in Oakland, she's in the Bay Area, and she hasn't been able to see my parents either just because you don't necessarily want to go and be in a
Risk.
room. Exactly. So it's almost like, is it that different if I'm in another state or in another country? And I do my best with the calls and emails to let them know that I care and I'm there for them.
Absolutely. And I think right now that's more important than ever to stay connected. And we really do need human interaction. And, even that aspect of giving them a hug, or I don't know if your family hugs,
Oh yeah,
but
we're huggers.
okay, good. People need that, especially now. But that connection is just so, so important. And I'm hoping people realize it even more so now. Um, well, what barriers do you see in moving to another country? Like maybe it could even be like visas, or, I mean, what are things that you absolutely must have in order to go to another country?
Yeah, so you touched upon it, understanding the visa laws regarding what passport you hold, right? And in addition, during this COVID era, understanding what restrictions they have for travel. So, I think we're going to consider that for at least another year in regards to the ability to move around. We all see the restrictions there. But kind of more to your question of working remotely from another country, I think understanding the type of work you have and the situation you're in. If you have your own business, if you're a consultant or contractor, you set your own rules, right? And you should be able to adjust and have clients and your patients or whomever kind of be able to meet your needs. Now, if you let's say you work a W-2 full-time job, right? Understanding, talking to your boss and making sure that they're okay with it, how long you'll be abroad. These are things that are important. So you always could go rogue, right? I've talked to friends about this. Use a Zoom background. No one knows where you are. But are you going to be able to be comfortable with that mentally, right? Or are you going to lose a little bit of sleep at night knowing that you haven't communicated this openly? So these are things to consider that, like, again, those kind of things that can affect your mental health that folks maybe don't think about, when they are just booking a ticket. And it's important to understand that they will weigh on you because, like we talked about, there's so many things you're thinking about. You're in a new culture. You have to find a new grocery store. Oh, where do you get your medications if you run out? Like there's so many. It's just like living in a new city, except with a lot more variables. So making sure you're ready for those little things, I think, is an also really important one, depending on how long you're going to be living from abroad. So
Yeah, and I think one thing that I really liked that you talked about in the book is asking your supervisor, testing the waters before actually making that jump, and just again showing them some research, showing them some data, and trying it out just a little bit to see how productive you are. Similar to your parents, like say, hey, look, I'm productive between 1 and 9, and this is what time it would overlap with you guys over here.
yeah, I think with the way the world is going and work, I think everyone's just trying to figure it out, right? And as long as you're able to communicate that your coworkers, your boss, they're human, you're human, right? And just being transparent, that can go a long way, right? And I think a lot of folks can get wrapped up in like, oh, I don't know if it's okay, like, but like there's nothing wrong with being transparent. And if it doesn't work out, or at least right? And that can be really helpful for just your overall sanity.
And we've been talking a lot about logistics, mental health. I mean, how have you been able to have fun in these different countries?
Yeah, so I was very, very fortunate to meet within about a half an hour when I arrived. 3 days after I arrived Portugal, the country actually locked down, and so I was scrambling to figure out, am I going home or not? And I met three other folks who work remotely, and we got very lucky and got a large house that we basically had these big slumber parties in for 2 months, right? So that way we had enough space. We all understood our work hours. And so during the lockdown, we actually just were fairly normal, just hermits playing board games and watching TV. So lockdown wise, that was great. Nowadays, with folks and countries understanding that a full lockdown may not be the most sustainable thing, on the weekends, being able to go for runs or hanging out with one or two people and going for a day trip to the beach, just like you would any other in the normal life and normal world. I think that it's just maybe tougher to meet people spontaneously at a bar or at a giant convention or meetup. But like you mentioned, apps and just friends of friends, as long as you're outgoing, you can normally meet a few good folks to do those things you just normally do, right? So,
Well, I imagine that was quick bonding to play games, work together, live together. And it takes a extreme amount of leap of faith, I would say, because I mean, who knew if these folks were able to be trustworthy, or, I mean, how did you gauge that, and where did you meet
yeah,
them?
honestly, it was just kind of more luck, but I met them so if you're interested in working from abroad, there are these co-living spaces that actually cater to remote workers. One of them is a company called Outsite, Outsite. They have locations in the States as well as Europe, and they have spaces for folks to work in. So I was staying at one of these spaces, and it was basically an exodus. Everyone was leaving to fly home, right? And there was only like 5 of us left in this building that normally houses like 40 people. So just understanding we're all on the same boat, and just you had to make a quick decision. And really the worst case scenario was you kind of have to do a lot of quick thinking, especially with a pandemic when you are working from abroad, understanding what's the best case scenario and what's the worst case. Worst case scenario, you don't get along with these people and you get your own place or you fly home, and understanding I'm okay with that, right? And as long as you are, then the most you're going to risk is obviously the amount you're paying for the place. So you're right. Like it was just kind of a gut feeling that, okay, I think this will work out. And now a couple of folks, some of my greatest friends that I have now, still keep in touch. And I think that's why we all love to travel. We all enjoy spontaneous moments, meeting new people, because those are the times that can be the most exciting sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, what you're speaking to is have an exit plan, but also be open-minded to letting people into your life.
Totally. Yep.
So, where can people find your e-publication, and what should they expect from the book? Because I know we've kind of jumped from chapter to chapter because, I'm such a nerd. I read it in one day. But where can they find it?
Yeah, so you can find the book at my website, wfabroad.com, stands for workfromabroad.com. You can also type it into Amazon. It's called Work From Abroad. And the book is really written for folks who have a full-time career, that have a 9 to 5. Your boss is hassling you. You got to have Zoom meetings you're attending. You're not a backpacker or freelancer. You have a career that you care about and you enjoy, because a lot of those jobs are now remote. So because I've been working that type of job, I understand those needs versus someone who maybe, I think the term digital nomad can kind of basically imply you may be like freelance or consultant and you're really flexible with hours. But my book is written for folks who have set hours, and how do you make that work from another country, whether that's within your time zone or another time zone, right? So the book really is a how-to guide in terms of preparation, thinking things through like we've talked about, executing on your plans, and going to that place or those places that you'll really enjoy professionally in terms of getting work done as well as personally. So made a lot of mistakes through my time and just wanted to share that. And it was a really great COVID project when we were in lockdown. So if you're curious about how do you work better remotely, check it out, Work from Abroad, and hope you get something out of it for sure.
Yeah, I think I would say that that's the first step is get Drew's book and so that you can kind of go through those different steps because it can be very overwhelming. And at the same time, you've organized it really nicely so that people can do their research, jot notes, and really benefit from the work from home, work from another country.
Yeah,
Thank you
maybe it's
so
just
much.
working from another part of your country, right? That can already be something that may be intimidating. So a lot of those theories still apply.
Yeah, I mean, for grad school, I went to Virginia, and that was a culture shock too. I mean, it's Northern Virginia, so it was very diverse outside of where the school was. But I think with anything, time differences, different culture. I mean, the Bay Area is very insulated in itself. It's changing, and obviously, people have had a mass exodus, but the housing market is still hot. People are trying to buy properties. And I mean, my hope is it goes back to some of the rich culture that we've had, even when I was a child, having the pockets of communities like the Mission District, kind of disappeared quite a bit during this, tech bubble and stuff. And tech is here to stay, and I'm glad it gives us our economy. And at the same time, I'm hoping it doesn't fully kick natives out.
No, 100%. I think, having lived there and seen that transformation, it's something that it has its pros and cons. And definitely the cons are how folks who are locals are impacted, right?
And it sounds like that's the case wherever you go.
Yeah, it's a issue this whole world is dealing with. The movement of people, right, is only going to increase. So when I was writing the book, I was thinking, should I share this? But I really tried to make sure in the conclusion to really hone in on to put locals and folks that are part of a community first, because it's going to happen more, I think, just with the way technology has impacted work. But how do we do it in a respectful manner that can still build community and allow folks to feel welcome or feel at home where they are at home, right?
I like that. Just build community. I think we all need that right now.
Ditto.
Well, Drew, thank you so much. Any other thoughts before we head out?
Yeah, no, Stephanie, this is great. If you have any questions personally, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Instagram at Eat More Spinach. So happy to answer questions. I love helping folks realize what they can do with the flexibility their jobs may have now.
Was that inspired by your travels? Eat More Spinach?
Oh, it was actually a friend of mine. I was poking fun at him. He had like an AIM screen name back in the day. You guys remember that? I don't know who's listening remembers Instant Messenger. His screen name was Drink Mountain Dew. And I told him hey man, you're just gonna get a bad habit and want to drink soda all day. You should have a more positive affirmation for a screen name. So then I went with Eat More Spinach, and it's just stuck, and I just like it. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, check all of Drew's socials out as well as his book. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know we are in a huge time difference and we finally found a time, so appreciate you. Thank you.
No, Stephanie, this is super fun and really excited. Love what you're doing with Colors of Success. So happy to be on the show.
Thanks so much. I am so grateful for having a meaningful conversation today on the Color of Success podcast. If you're interested in learning more about our guests, becoming a guest, would like to sponsor a show, and/or learn more about my business, please visit www.drstephaniejwong.com. If you feel like doing an act of kindness, please leave a review to further spread positivity. With gratitude, Stephanie.